In the autumn of 1979, inside a converted gymnasium on the eastern edge of Torrance, California, 214 martial artists sat in folding chairs arranged in 9 rows. The floor was pale hardwood, the kind that catches light at low angles and holds it. Outside, the Pacific Coast Highway ran its ordinary Saturday business. A delivery truck idled at a red light. Pigeons moved along a telephone wire without concern for what was about to happen inside. The event was billed as a certification seminar. The United States Karate Association had organized it for advanced practitioners, brown belts, black belts, a handful of second and third dans who had driven from as far as Sacramento and Tucson to be there. The registration table near the entrance had a hand-lettered sign. Folding tables held thermoses of coffee that had been hot 2 hours earlier. The air smelled of floor wax and chalk. Chuck Norris was in the building. Most of the people in those 9 rows did not know it yet. Seated in the 4th row, 3rd seat from the right aisle, in a gray cotton shirt and dark slacks and a pair of plain rubber-soled shoes that no one would have looked at twice, he had arrived 11 minutes before the session began, and taken a chair without introducing himself to anyone near him. He had a cup of coffee balanced on his knee. He had not changed into a gi. He was 42 years old that year, 5 feet 10, 173 pounds. His hair had begun going silver at the temples. The woman at the registration desk had handed him a name tag. He had folded it in half and placed it in his jacket pocket. There were 7 people in that room who recognized him immediately. One was the seminar organizer, a third Dan named Gerald Hoffman, who had booked the room, paid the deposit, and driven 40 minutes that morning with a trunk full of folding chairs. Another was a senior instructor from the Japan Karate Association named Kenji Watanabe, 61 years old, who had arrived from Los Angeles the previous evening and was sitting in the 2nd row with his hands resting flat on his thighs. The other 5 recognized Norris by degrees. The way people recognize a face they have seen in print but not in person. A slow resolution from possibility to certainty. Nobody said anything. The woman standing at the front of that room had not seen him yet. Her name was Diana Reyes. She was 28 years old, 5 feet 4. 131 pounds. She held a first-degree black belt from the American Taekwondo Association, earned 3 years earlier after a testing period that one examiner later described as the most technically precise he had witnessed from any candidate in 11 years of examining. She had been competing in open tournaments since she was 19. Her tournament record at that point in the autumn of 1979 was 47 wins and 8 losses across 6 states. She had placed in the top 3 at the Southwest Open in consecutive years. She had trained under Masters Park and Lim before establishing her own instruction program in Hawthorne, California, where she ran 2 evening classes per week out of a rented church gymnasium. She was the only woman scheduled to present that day. She had earned that slot by submitting a 16-page technical paper on centerline theory and its application to Tang Sudo sparring defense. The organizers had considered 2 other candidates for the demonstration slot before selecting her. She had prepared the demonstration for 9 weeks. She had rehearsed the opening sequence 81 times. She was genuinely exceptional. What she was about to do had nothing to do with her skill. In 22 minutes, from that precise moment, the room would be absolutely silent in a way that 214 trained martial artists would spend the next 4 decades attempting to describe to people who were not there. What was said in that silence, 4 words, spoken so quietly that only one person other than the speaker heard them, was not written down anywhere for 11 years. If you want to hear those 4 words, stay until the end. Diana Reyes began her demonstration at 9:47 in the morning. She opened with a centerline entry drill that she ran through 4 iterations without stopping, clean and economical, the mechanics exactly as she had rehearsed them. The room watched. Applause came at the end of the first sequence, measured and genuine. Instructors in the 2nd and 3rd rows were nodding. Kenji Watanabe in the 2nd row had his eyes fixed on her footwork with the specific attention of a man cross-checking what he is seeing against a long internal catalog. She was good. The room knew it. This is important. What followed did not happen because Diana Reyes was a fraud. It happened because she was accomplished enough to have developed a certainty about certain things. And certainty in a room full of people has a way of expanding until it fills whatever space is available. 15 minutes into the demonstration, she moved to the second portion, which concerned the application of centerline theory to sparring defense against larger opponents. This was the portion she had written the technical paper about. This was the work she believed in most. She had trained it against male partners who outweighed her by 40, 50, 60 pounds, and she had made it function. She was not wrong about the mechanics. She was not wrong about the theory. She was, on that morning, in that room, about to be wrong about one specific thing, in front of the one person on the planet most qualified to demonstrate the error. She asked the room for a volunteer. She was looking toward the front rows. She expected someone in the first 3 rows to stand, someone in a gi, someone whose credentials she could read from the color of their belt. Several hands went up. Then a voice from the 4th row said simply, "I can help with that." She looked toward the voice. A man in a gray shirt was standing, plain clothes, no gi, rubber-soled shoes, a paper coffee cup in one hand. She assessed him the way any instructor would assess a volunteer, briefly, functionally. She saw a man her father's age in street clothes. She saw silver at the temples. She saw no visible training indicators. She made a decision that was entirely reasonable given what she could observe, and that decision was the mistake. She said, "That's kind of you, but I should probably use someone with documented rank for this portion. I want the audience to know the resistance is genuine." The room did not move. Then she added, more quietly but not quietly enough, because the gymnasium had good acoustics, no offense to the civilians in the room. The word civilians landed differently in different rows. In the 7th row, a brown belt from Tucson named Carter looked immediately at the man in the gray shirt to see how he would respond. In the 2nd row, Kenji Watanabe closed his eyes for approximately 2 seconds, and then opened them again. Gerald Hoffman, standing to the left of the presentation area with a clipboard at his side, set the clipboard down on the table next to him with a sound like a quiet period at the end of a sentence. Chuck Norris was already sitting back down. He had already placed the paper coffee cup on the empty chair to his right. He sat in the 4th row for 40 seconds after that. The room had not fully recovered from its own reaction to the word civilians. Some people were looking at the floor. One instructor in the 3rd row was looking at the ceiling. The seminar organizer was looking at the door. Then the man in the 3rd row, the brown belt from Sacramento named Phil Arden, leaned back and said, low enough that he thought it was private, "That's Chuck Norris." He was not quiet enough. Diana Reyes heard it. She turned her head. The gymnasium on the eastern edge of Torrance, California, in the autumn of 1979, held 214 people. 213 of them were either completely still or becoming still in a slow wave that moved from the center of the room outward toward the edges, like a current moving across dark water. Coffee cups stopped moving. Breathing became a thing people were aware of. The man in the 2nd row with his hands flat on his thighs had not changed position at all. He had already been still. Diana Reyes looked at the man in the gray shirt in the 4th row. The man in the gray shirt looked back at her. She said, "Will you come up?" It was not a question. It was the only thing she could have said. He stood. He picked up the paper coffee cup. He handed it to the person seated next to him, a woman in a blue gi who accepted it without looking at it. He moved down the row without hurrying. He reached the aisle and walked to the front of the room. He stopped 8 feet from where Diana Reyes was standing. He removed his jacket. He folded it once, lengthwise, with 2 deliberate movements of his hands. He set it on the edge of the presentation table to his left, parallel to the edge. He stood in his gray shirt with his arms at his sides, and looked at her with an expression that contained no impatience and no performance. She looked at him. He has already lost. She just does not know it yet. If you are watching this and you have not yet subscribed, do it now. What is about to happen in this room is exactly why this channel exists. Subscribe and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. A fight is not 2 people demonstrating to each other. A fight is a conversation about distance. The person who controls the distance controls the conversation. The person who controls the conversation decides how long it lasts. Chuck Norris understood this at a level that had taken 21 years to develop. 21 years that began in a dojo in Seoul in 1958 when he was a 19-year-old airman who had never trained a day in his life, and that had continued without interruption through the Tang Sudo Championships, through the years of active competition, through the years of teaching, through the period after Bruce Lee, through the Walker years that hadn't come yet. Distance control was not a technique he had learned, it was a language he had become fluent in, and then forgotten he was speaking. Diana Reyes did not know this about the man standing 8 feet from her. She knew other things. She knew the centerline theory she had written 16 pages about. She knew her drill sequences. She knew how to work against a larger opponent. She was about to discover that working against a larger opponent and working against this particular man were not the same class of problem. The first attempt lasted 3.5 seconds. She initiated with a linear entry, exactly as her demonstration had outlined, the centerline approach that she had run 81 times in rehearsal. It was clean. It was technically correct. She closed the distance in the way that the theory prescribed. He was not where the theory said he would be. He had moved 4 inches to his left, and 1 inch back. The movement was so small that 3 people in the front row did not register it as movement at all. They registered only that her entry had arrived at empty space. His right hand was at the midpoint between them, open, thumb upward, positioned in a way that was simultaneously a block that had not needed to block anything, and a demonstration of exactly where the center line was. She reset. The room did not breathe. In the second row, Kenji Watanabe had straightened slightly. The tournament director from the USCA, a man named Robert Kahn who had been adjudicating martial arts competitions for 16 years, had placed both hands flat on his knees in a posture that his wife would later say he only used when he was watching something he needed to fix in his memory. The second attempt lasted 4 seconds. She adjusted. She came with a combination, a feint to the high line followed by a low entry, a sequence that had worked in tournament competition against opponents 30 pounds heavier and 6 inches taller. It was smart. It was sophisticated. It was the adaptation of someone who was genuinely skilled and was processing what she had just seen and responding to it correctly. He was not there for that either. The movement this time was different, a quarter rotation of his hips and a half step that changed the angle of engagement entirely, so that her combination arrived at a different version of the same problem. Her technique was sound, her target had simply ceased to be where a reasonable person would have expected it. His left hand was now positioned between them, not quite touching her lead arm, close enough that she could feel the proximity of it, a presence that was not contact but was very precisely a message about where contact was available if someone chose it. She stepped back. She looked at him. He was looking at her with the same expression he had walked in with. Nothing in it had changed. He had the same posture, the same distribution of weight, the same quality of attention. He was not performing patience, he was merely present. The tournament director Robert Kahn, in the third row, exhaled through his nose. It was the only sound in the room. In the sixth row, a second Dan from Tucson named Miriam Cho had her hands pressed together in her lap with an intensity she was not aware of. She had been training for 9 years. She understood what she was watching. She understood that what she was watching was not a man resisting a woman. She was watching a man conduct a class without saying a word, using another instructor's lesson as the medium. The third attempt was the most technically correct thing Diana Reyes had attempted that morning. She had abandoned her prepared material entirely. She was no longer demonstrating centerline theory. She was responding, genuinely, to what was in front of her, working from 9 years of tournament competition and 3 years of teaching, calling on everything that had ever been useful. She moved with a combination that changed levels and directions twice before arriving, the kind of sequence that people who have spent serious time competing know to be difficult to anticipate. He saw it before it was finished. The movement he made was so economical that 2 people in the front row genuinely could not locate in their memory afterward what had happened. One moment she was in the final extension of her combination. The next moment she was stopped. Not stopped painfully, Not stopped roughly, but stopped completely. By a placement of his forearm against the outer line of her entry that was exactly enough. Exactly the amount required to redirect without force, to receive without collision. A movement that contained within it more information about the art she had been demonstrating for the past 18 minutes than any of the 18 minutes had contained. He held the position for 1 full second. She felt it. Then he moved his forearm away. He stepped back. He lowered both hands to his sides. He stood. The room was now in a different kind of silence than it had been in before. Rooms have different silences. The silence after applause is not the same silence as the silence before speaking. The silence of a gym at 3 in the morning is not the silence of a gym in which 214 people have just witnessed something they do not have language for yet. This was the second kind. Diana Reyes stood 6 feet from him. Her chest was moving with her breathing. Her hands were at her sides.
She was looking at him with an expression that was not embarrassment and was not anger and was not defeat exactly. It was the expression of a person who has spent 9 years building a structure and has just encountered something that does not fit inside the structure and has not yet decided what that means.
He looked at her. His right hand came up. Open, palm facing him. Not extended for a handshake but positioned between them at the midpoint. A gesture that contained an offering in it. He said something. He said it quietly. He said it at a volume calibrated so that no one beyond arm's reach could hear the specific words, only the cadence of them. A cadence that lasted approximately 4 seconds and consisted of 4 words. Kenji Watanabe in the second row heard it. He heard it because he was 11 feet away and because the room was very silent, and because he had been expecting something to be said, which means his attention was of the sharpest possible kind. Diana Reyes heard it. She stood still for a moment after she heard it. Then she made a choice. The choice was visible to everyone in the room because choices of a certain kind are always visible, not in their content but in their quality. The choice was not to deflect, not to explain, not to find the word that would locate the previous 20 minutes inside a frame where she remained correct. The choice was the other thing, the harder thing. She brought both hands together at the center of her chest and bowed. Not the brief functional bow of tournament protocol. A full bow held for 3 complete seconds, the bow of someone returning something they had been carrying incorrectly. She said, at full room volume, I owe this room an apology and I owe this man a very long conversation. The first applause started in the second row. It moved through the 9 rows in approximately 4 seconds. By the time it reached the 9th row, it was not polite applause, not the applause of an audience being courteous to a difficult moment. It was the applause of 214 people who had come to a certification seminar on a Saturday morning and received something they had not expected to receive and knew they would not forget. Chuck Norris collected his jacket from the presentation table. He folded it once over his arm. He looked at Diana Reyes for a moment. Then he walked back up the aisle to the 4th row and sat down. He picked up the paper coffee cup from the person next to him, who was still holding it. He drank what remained of it. Kenji Watanabe spoke to 2 people that afternoon. The first was Gerald Hoffman, the seminar organizer, whom he found at the registration table during the lunch break. What he said to Hoffman took approximately 2 minutes. Hoffman listened without interrupting and then nodded and wrote nothing down, which meant he intended to remember all of it. The second person Watanabe spoke to was a martial arts journalist from Long Beach named Alan Prentice, who had attended the seminar as an observer and who had a small spiral notebook in his jacket pocket that he had not opened during the morning session because he had been watching too carefully to write. Prentice published a short piece in January of 1980. It ran in a regional martial arts newsletter with a circulation of approximately 800 people. The piece described the seminar in general terms and contained 1 paragraph that described the demonstration without naming either participant. The paragraph was reprinted, without attribution, in 3 other newsletters over the following 18 months. By 1982, the story existed in the oral tradition of dojo culture across California and Nevada, in at least 4 distinct versions. In one version, the woman had challenged Chuck Norris directly and was invited onto the floor in response. In another version, the 3rd attempts became 5, and the 5th involved a technique so advanced that the room gave a second round of applause before the demonstration ended. In a 3rd version, a senior Japanese instructor had intervened between the 2nd and 3rd attempts. In the 4th and most widely circulated version, which was the least accurate, Norris had not been recognized until after the demonstration was complete. None of these versions were entirely wrong, all of them were less accurate than what had actually happened. This is the way stories carry themselves across time. They keep the architecture and change the interior. The architecture here was this. A woman who was genuinely skilled had made an assumption in front of a room full of people about what a man in plain clothes could not be. The man had been, with complete patience and without a word of instruction, the answer to that assumption. And then she had stood at a fork in the road and chosen the direction that required more of her. And the room had recognized what she had chosen, and that recognition had been its own kind of legacy. Diana Reyes continued teaching in Hawthorne, California for 11 more years. In 1990, she opened a full-time dojo in Inglewood. She trained 7 students who went on to earn black belts under her instruction. One of them competed at the national level. She retired from active instruction in 2003. A student of hers, in a letter published in a Southern California martial arts journal in 2007, wrote that in 9 years of training under her she had heard the story of the certification seminar exactly 3 times, always in the context of a specific technical point about assumptions and preparation, and the difference between knowing a thing and having tested it under the right conditions. Kenji Watanabe, when asked about it in a 1991 interview for a Japanese martial arts publication, confirmed that he had been present. He was asked what Norris had said to her, quietly, before she bowed. He considered the question for a moment. Then he said he preferred not to repeat it, because repeating it would make it smaller than it was. The 4 words were written down for the first time in a 2004 memoir, by a first Dan who had been seated in the 5th row that morning. He prefaced them by saying he could not verify he had heard correctly, because the room was silent, but he was not 11 feet away. He wrote that what he believed he heard was, "You already know this." Whether those were the exact words or not, they carry within them the truth of what that morning was about. Diana Reyes already knew the thing that the demonstration had exposed. Not as a fact, but as a possibility she had not yet made room for. The words. If those were the words were not a correction, they were a confirmation that the correction was hers to make. This is what patience teaches that force cannot. Force changes what a person does. Patience changes what a person sees. The two are not the same discipline, and they do not produce the same student. The light kept falling on the hardwood floor that morning, indifferent to what had just happened on it. The Pacific Coast Highway continued its Saturday traffic outside. The delivery truck that had been idling at the red light had long since moved on. The pigeons were somewhere else entirely. 214 people drove home from Torrance that afternoon carrying something they had not carried in. Most of them would spend a long time learning to describe what it was. Next week, we go inside the day a Navy SEAL instructor challenged Chuck Norris in front of his entire class, and what happened in the following 6 seconds that not one of those students ever forgot.